73. And thank you, Barbara, for sponsoring this class. I hope that helped towards your goal. And law 10. So it's the laws like this. It says that Kalim sha'osim behem melacha. If you have utensils, tools that are used to do something that's forbidden on Shabbos. So the thing itself is forbidden on Shabbos, the work that's going to be done. For example, kigoi machresha, like a plow. You're not allowed to plow on the Shabbos. So what's the law about Kitzure and other things that are forbidden on Shabbos? Same things would obviously apply. Same law would, same idea would obviously apply to electronics, I would assume. Is Asr lahasker le'eni Yehudi be'erev Shabbos. If you want to rent it out, you cannot rent it out on a Friday. So if you have a plow, you want to rent it out and take money for it. So you can't do that transaction on a Friday. One would ask, what do you mean? Am I obligated that the animals have to rest on Shabbos? But this is not an animal, this is a plow. Do I have an obligation for my plow to be resting, so to say, on the Shabbos? No. So why can't I give it out to someone and rent it out? Because there's a financial transaction, even though the financial transaction is going to you as opposed to you're not paying someone. Nevertheless, Shabbos, and you've done this transaction, this financial transaction on the Erev Shabbos on Friday. Mechse is considered or looked upon as if the non-Jew is your emissary. Seemingly, for the non-Jew to be your emissary, you would pay them. But nevertheless, the financial relationship combines the two of you to be connected, and therefore there could be the idea that the person, when he or she works on the Shabbos, is working on you as your emissary. However, if it's the day before, on Thursday, because then it doesn't seem like you hired this person, or this person is your emissary to work on the Shabbos. What about if you want to lend it to the person, not in a rental? There's no financial transaction. You're just lending it out. Shabbos. Then even on the Friday, it's okay. Even even if it's vessels or tools that you do work with it, nevertheless, it's okay if you lend it because there's no financial transaction. Therefore, it's not considered as if the person is your emissary. But hold on, Aaron. But there is one condition: the non-Jew, the Gentile, cannot come on the Shabbos, means Friday night after sunset, and pick up that borrowed tool. And hold on, so let's finish the connection here. Even if you make a condition, I'm lending you this, but I would like to borrow from you on Monday your mixer or your television or your car, right? I'll lend you my car if you lend me your car. So then, even though there's some sort of transaction, it's not a free loan. There's something you're getting in return, but the person's not paying you a renting. He's not renting, or she's not renting it from you. It's not a money transaction. Therefore, the favor transaction is not considered as if the person is your emissary. Mutter is still permitted. We don't consider the lending understanding, the borrowing understanding, as a type of rental, and therefore it is permitted. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, so using money as like you said, as the example, if two people both live in New York, and I'm going to use him as my emissary, and on the other half of the world, it's on Saturday, it's Sunday, and let's just say I could make money by buying stocks or investing, and I use even a non-Jew to do my transaction. It's forbidden to give him the money on Friday, or does this only have to do with vessels and?
Okay, so it's a good question, but this is not the topic that we're talking about. Over here, we're talking about you. Let's just make it simple. You have a car, or let's say a plow is a good example because a plow is a straight up biblical prohibition. You're not allowed to plow on the Shabbos. You have a plow. or if you want to, and if a I would assume that a lawnmower would be the same idea, right? Because you're cutting the grass, which is prohibited on the Shabbos. If someone came to you, a Gentile said, I would like to rent your lawnmower so I could mow my lawn on Friday. He comes to you on Friday for this transaction. You're not allowed to rent it out. You could lend it to him or her, but you're not allowed to rent it out. The money that he's paying you as a rent, the rental fee for taking your lawnmower, right, is making that financial transaction makes it as if he is now or she is now your shliach, your emissary, to mow the lawn with your mower on the Shabbos, which is a prohibition on Shabbos. However,
Could I give him the mower as a, like you said, without any transaction on Friday? He keeps it until Monday and double charge him on Sunday?
that's an excellent question. That's called harama. You know, harama means it's like when you're trying to. That's a good question. We're going to see about how the transactions have to work, because there's a problem of havla. You're definitely not allowed to take money for Friday, anyways. Even if you were to sign a contract for someone and say, I'm renting you this and this for 365 days, it's $10 a day, and therefore you owe me $3,600 because you paid for 365 $10 a day. Means each day is spelled out. That's prohibited in any situation because it's called, then you see a clear transaction that's being done on the Shabbos. But if you're to say, you could rent it for me for a year for $3,600, even though technically it works out to $10 a day, nevertheless, it's called Bahavla. You never spelled out per day. So there's no dollar per day kind of charge. It's a monthly or yearly or weekly charge, or 48-hour charge is also okay. So therefore, the question, if you're talking about if you were to double charge them on Sunday, for Sunday, with kind of you both on the winking at each other, knowing that's really you're charging $20 for Sunday, really it's $10 for each day. That may not be a problem, although it's not exactly straightforward. But that's okay. It doesn't have to be straightforward because you're not really doing a transgression over here by renting it out. Because at the end of the day is you don't have to have your lawnmower in your garage doing nothing on the Shabbos. It's just mechse. It looks as if he's your messenger. So here you're giving it to him as a loan, and then you're turning that loan into a transaction after the Shabbos. It could be, it's a good, excellent question. It could be that would be permitted. But the straight up loan is okay. Just to lend your lawnmower, sure, take my lawnmower. Even if you say, well, next week I would like you to lend me your car or something, you know what I mean? So even though there's a kind of a transaction in the lending relationship, but there's no financial transaction, it's still permitted. So similarly, I'm assuming your question, which is an excellent question, would be permitted. So then in such a situation it's permitted. Okay, and renting on Friday things that are not, hold on, Barbara, there's no prohibition in the tool's usage to rent your broom on Shabbos, let's say, is mutar afilu b'erev Shabbos. Then even on a Friday you can do it again. You could do the transaction of the renting on a Thursday. You just can't do it on a Friday. Again, this own condition that the non-Jew comes and takes it out before the Shabbos. Yes, Barbara.
I just want to make you aware, Howard just posted on WhatsApp that the YouTube feed is down.
Yes, because that is because I had to change the YouTube. So let me hold on while we're doing all sorry, the small mistakes turn into big. But hold on, I'm gonna post. Let me see if I can do this while we're not to take up too much time of our studying here. Hold on, I'm not sure how to do this. Oh, here we go.
Just tell Howard to join us on this channel. And Howard, if you hear me, you could just join us on Zoom. But if not, he's going to fix it.
He can't join us on Zoom because he's on he's not listening. They can't hear you.
They can only hear you?
I'm saying he can't hear you because he's not on the YouTube. He's not on the YouTube.
Oh, I should text him, but I don't want to lose what I got.
Hold on a second. I'm gonna do it right now.
The funny thing is, I could walk to his house in 5 or 10 minutes.
I don't know. You guys are so close. Okay, here you go.
Yeah, but I don't want to lose what I got.
Okay, let's go. Let's continue. So this is okay. I just posted it. So here we go.
Says he's watching now.
So we have 27, footnote 27. Rabbeinu, so we're talking about it's forbidden to rent non-Jews on Erev Shabbos. This is Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah is the great Rabbeinu Yonah, who was a Rishon. Rabbi Kiva Eger or Chaim rules that we may be lenient in cases where the article is normally used only for work that is rabbinically prohibited. So if it's not like a plow, which is biblical, like I said, that's why the plow is the example as opposed to things that may not be biblical. So if something that's rabbinically a prohibition, we could be lenient to rent it on the Friday if you didn't do it before on Thursday. So there's a difference if it's a rabbinic prohibition or a biblical prohibition. And there, Rabbi Kiva Eger says you could be lenient. On 28, it's talking about in the case where you've worked out an agreement that you will lend him or her your article that's prohibited, your tool, and if they return the favor at another time to you. He says if you lend them to him on the occasion that he lends you his tools at a later date for even longer period of time, sibar halacha. On the condition, sorry. So the writing's so small. If you lend them to them on a condition that he lends it to his tools at a later date for even longer time, then it could be a question. Meaning to say, then it's not a free trade. Hold on, Aaron. It's not just a free trade, but you're lending it for one day and he has to lend you back or she has to lend you back for 2 days. So there the transaction is maybe a little more questionable than just a free exchange of articles. Yes, Aaron.
What about creature comforts like air conditioners and fans?
Well, it depends. See, again, how you look at we have to look into the law of what is the prohibition of an air conditioning and a fan using electricity on Shabbos. Plowing is definitely one of the biblical. The question is going to be if the air conditioning is considered lighting a fire on the Shabbos. So,
well, they told me driving a car is lighting a fire on Shabbos because it's not an animal.
Yeah. So that's where the question of how electricity is viewed. But it's definitely not. It's rabbinic. Definitely, it's rabbinical. It's a rabbinical for sure. And therefore, you shouldn't do it on the Friday to lend someone your fan or air conditioner. You can lend it to them. You can't rent it to them. All right, verse, law number 11. So it says like this. This that we said in all the different situations where it's okay to rent to a non-Jew your tools on Friday, Thursday, what have you. Dafka, this is where the question comes to havla, so to say, swallowed up, where you kind of round up the pricing or the rent. This is all on condition that you do not take the rent specifically for Shabbos separately. Ella b'havla, it's only allowed in a case of havla toch shari yamim. So how is he translating in English havla? Only when you're not paid for Shabbos separately, but rather as a day among the other days. Okay, he's just translating the idea, not translating the word. The word havla means kind of swallowed up, where the days are swallowed up to become a single unit as opposed to a separate day. So if you say, like I said, you charge per the week or for 48 hours, but Shabbos is not spelled out as a specific day, so then it's okay. But if you're going to say, I'm renting it to you for 3 days and my price is $10 a day, so then Shabbos becomes its own day, then even on Thursday, it's not allowed. He gives an example. If you rent it for a month or a week, even though your price for a week is a quarter of the price of a month, which basically is per day. Nevertheless, it's not contracted that way. This is my price per week or per month. Even 48 hours is okay. Or 3 days. If 2 days is okay, then of course 3 days is okay. But to take rent per day, Aser litol, that's not allowed. Therefore, if you own obviously this is a much more complicated law, how it comes into partnerships, but straight up to own a car rental place and rent it per the day, because car rentals do have weekly options. But if it's rented where, the contract clearly says it's a day price, that would be a problem. You can't take Shabbos as a special day. Yes, Aaron.
You can't own a car rental place as a Jew because if it's by the day, you would never make any money.
Yeah,
You got a
yeah.
lot of non-Jews.
Yes, so I know that's why they have partnerships. You could do shutfim. There's ways around the problem. Shabbos businesses that are open on Shabbos that are, let's say, if it gets into these are complicated laws also.
Even if you shut down the business and no one's working there, the guy still has your car.
No. I know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. I'm saying that. So there's ways around that if you have a non-Jewish partner. So then the non-Jewish and we there's an idea of partnership, but where you have a partnership, and as long as you don't spell it out, I'm taking Sunday versus what you're taking Shabbos. But they have this idea of partnerships that get us around the Shabbos problem, because the same thing would apply to any kind of business, even if it's a hotel or a hospital that you charge per day. There's a lot of this gets very complicated. How we take profit on the Shabbos. It gets even complicated. It's questionable even when it comes to owning shares of a company that does things, that owns chametz or things like that, when it comes to Pesach. So how does it work with partnerships? That's a subject on its own. But the straight
working, the same rules apply when renting to a Jew, because I know this. I might have brought it up once. There's a kosher hotel in Borough Park that mostly, I don't know if anybody but Jews use it, and they're renting on Shabbat.
So I know. First of all, you have in Israel, so they have but they're not doing anything prohibited. The question is making money on Shabbos. How it works about making money, but it means no one's doing. They're just renting. A car rental is different than a hotel, but nevertheless, it goes into the question of making money on Shabbos. So they have ways that it's set up for a person to be able to have these things operated. Yes, Barbara.
I was just wondering, how would this apply? Because you mentioned like stocks and stuff. So like you have a 401k and all your money that you're putting into it is distributed across these stocks, and they're making money on Shabbat. And so how does that work?
Yeah, so there's many books and publications of discussing, and this is it becomes a question even more severe. Let's say on the Pesach, if you were to own stock in a company that has chametz is you can't have any ownership of chametz, right? So it's then you become an owner of chametz. These are all questions, and there's discussions about how we work around these things, and Shabbos and chametz and all these other prohibitions in joint partnerships. 401k, Mr. Rabbi, is less difficult than direct ownership of a stock, because there's already a buffer between you and the stock. You don't even know how you own really shares of the 401k of the fund, and the fund owns the shares of the company and is paying you, based on their profits. So it's not really directly as much if you were literally to buy shares in the company and own shares of the company, as opposed to owning shares in the fund.
What do they do?
It's similar to what you were saying last week about a house. If you arrange for someone to build a house for you and they work on Shabbat, that's forbidden. But if I buy a house from a realtor, there's a buffer there. So it's the same thing. Okay.
Similar. Again, it has to be discussed. This is not the place for it. Here we're talking about taking profits from your utensils that are being used on Shabbos, and even if you gave it out in a permissible way, if the money is spelled out on the Shabbos, that's prohibited. Again, even he says even 2 days is okay, but not 24 hours. I was Shabbos, and they asked me to take the wages of Shabbos on its own. Hey, Ariel, welcome. Then Asilito, then you can't take, if you have a contract that's daily, you can't take the money for the Shabbos. I feel even if you have a rental agreement that's for a year per day, right? So let's say I'm just giving an example, not that this is a prohibition, but saying that the example would be sometimes people take a Airbnb, right? So the price is I'm charging you per day. You want to be here for a year, you can pay every day this amount of money. So then that idea, if it's in a rental with a tool that's a prohibition that is prohibited on Shabbos, its usage is prohibited on Shabbos, would be considered a problem. Why? Hey Rebecca, why? Shaimarni, because I say ani maskilcha l'shana shaimer, because it says ani maskilcha l'shana chodesh ba'ad kol yom. Because I'm basically telling the person, I'm giving it to you for a year. Or I want money. How many days are in the year? I want money for each day. Even in such a case, where is it prohibited? Even in the case where at the end, when the person pays, he doesn't give you 300 checks, or she doesn't give you 300 checks or 300 credit card charges. You pay one time. You're paying with one check, one transaction, one wire, one ACH, whatever you have. But the calculation is based on per day, it's prohibited. You cannot take that money. You have to say, okay, there's 52 Shabbosim in the year. You have to take out the 52 Shabbosim, unless you contract it as on a weekly or even bi-daily basis. Why? Because at the end of the day, the very fact that you're counting separate days and you're taking money for Shabbos, that's prohibited. And it's prohibited. There's no way around it. You cannot take Shabbos money within. It's not havla. It's not a group together, swallowed in to a general price. Even if the tool is not a prohibition, means even if you're renting, and this is where it goes to Aaron's case with the hotel. Means I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm sleeping in the room. I'm allowed to stay. If I was your guest, I could stay in your house. But the fact that you're charging me to stay in your house, and I'm taking money for the Shabbos, that's prohibited. Here you go. Even to stay in a room, but you're paying for the day of Shabbos, that's prohibited. Doesn't make a difference if you're making money off a Jew or non-Jew. So therefore, it's majorly a question, obviously, of how do the hotels in Israel, or like Aaron says in Borough Park, the places that have kosher hotels, and your clientele are Jewish or Gentile, how do they operate? So they obviously have a system built in where there's a partnership with the Gentile, where the Gentile gets a little bit of the profits, and based on that, the money is going towards that partnership. Again, but it's not just as simple as that, but that's the basis of the idea. How exactly it has to be worked out has to obviously be dealt with your local rabbi. I mean, again, this could be a simple question. If you have an Airbnb, or if you have how do you run an Airbnb on the Shabbos? So it's not so simple if you're making money on the Shabbos. And I don't.
But isn't there everyone says ask your local rabbi, but there's a general rule that Israel and America and Europe and they're all over the world. You got to follow something the rabbis look at and say, this is why I say what I say.
So yeah, I know that there is a way to. There's obviously, listen, Airbnb. I'm trying to see which I can't find footnote number 29 here. Oh, here it is. Airbnb. Let's just see this note, and then we'll get back to your question. Ron, this is prohibited only because the non-Jew may back out in the middle of the week and pay only for the days that he actually used it. But if this is the Ramah says an interesting way of looking at it. But if the terms of the contract require him to pay for the entire time, you may take the rent for the Shabbos as well. So the Ramah makes a big deal. He said like this: the only time it's a problem if you're taking payment for a week, even if you're paying it that when it's being paid for per day, is if the contract allows for the Gentile to back out and say, okay, I only took it for 3 days, even though the contract's for a week, but I'm only going to pay for the 3 days. It becomes a problem, because then clearly you see that the Shabbos was a special day. But if the contract says you're taking it for a week, the price is per day, but if you back out, you still have to pay because your contract is for a week. And the contract, that stipulation, that condition in the contract, automatically makes it into a havla. Meaning to say, you have to look at what that means. The very fact that you have to pay for the week and you can't back out of the contract once you start the contract, by definition, makes it a single payment. In the situation of how does it work with hotels and other such things where a Jewish person has ownership, I'm saying is there is a method of doing it, obviously, but I'm not, I don't have that method here that I could tell you right offhand. But there's a concept of a partnership with a Gentile that you go into that contract. I'll study more about it to bring it up in the next class. Is what's used for a way for allowing for you to have that system. Again, the same thing applies. I know my grandfather owned. They sold, rest in peace, owned old age homes, and so you have Jews and non-Jews that are paying price per day to be in the hospital. So he had a system of a partnership for Shabbos. But I'm saying, but even that's a business. But you have sometimes it's a little more complicated. If a person says, "Okay, I have I have a basement in my house. I want to open it up to Airbnb." While that's okay, it's you have to figure out how to do it, because if you're taking a price per day and you're taking money for Shabbos, it's a problem. Especially if people rent out only for the day. People sometimes don't take it for 2 days. If you make it a 2-day contract or something else. And okay, and also Airbnb, the problem with Airbnb is that you don't have the you're not setting up the contract. The contract is being done by Airbnb. So again, that could be
when you get sick and you get thrown in the hospital on Friday or Saturday, and you're paying for a room, even though your insurance is kind of paying for it, but you pay the insurance.
No, that's different. That's different when yeah, Pekuach Nefesh is Pekuach Nefesh is Liora asked the question. Pekuach Nefesh is only if it comes to you suddenly, like an emergency room, is different than if a person puts their parents into a old age home. That's you can't say that you, when you have the time to organize it halachically, that you could use the clause of Pekuach Nefesh. It means even if the person needs to be in an old age home, but the very fact that you sign any other contract, you have to be able to set it up in a way that's permissible on Shabbos and not use the clause of Pekuach Nefesh and say, well, I'm going to get paid for Shabbos. And also Pekuach Nefesh is that you have to take care of the person. Doesn't mean you have to get paid for it. But Aaron, again, your question about going to the hospital, that's you're paying them, not that you're being paid for. We're talking about a case where you're the owner.
Yeah, so you're the
For the hospital, you're taking in patients.
Exactly, that's the same thing as an old age home. So again, an emergency room is something else. But as far as I'm trying to remember, I think even Israel has a thing called terem. Terem is an emergency walk-in. They did a great thing. Unfortunately, the person who started, Dr. Applebaum, was murdered. I remember this clearly in the German colony many years ago in the Second Intifada, the night before his daughter got married. Horrible story. And he opened up in Jerusalem, I think 2 or 3 or maybe more places called Terem, which is an emergency centers, walk-in emergency centers with quality workers, etc. And they are open on the Shabbos, I believe. Of course, I think I was there on Shabbos. I don't believe you've given any information. Like even if you're on the insurance, I don't think they process the insurance information on Shabbos. And I think either after Shabbos, could be you have to come in. I don't know the details, but obviously, again, it has to be worked out in a way with the partnership. The fundamental idea is the partnership. A partnership with the Gentile is permitted, and even if the Gentile is taking money for the Shabbos and you're taking against that money in the week, as long as it's not stipulated like that you take Shabbos, I take Monday. But if you figure out a way to kind of just say that 50% is yours, 50% is mine, even though, and the same thing applies to other laws, for instance, a convert who inherits something from his parents or her parents in inheritance, and there's things that are prohibited for you to have. Let's say wine. Let's say your parents own. Let's say you have a Gentile. Your parents are Gentile because you're a convert, and you inherit your family estate, your parents' estate, and in it there's a value of, let's say, a few cases of wine. It doesn't have to be a huge value, and you say, well, you take the wine because I can't drink non-kosher wine, and I'll take in the place, the vegetables or the pillows, whatever it is, so that you can't stipulate it like that. But there's ways around it where it's kind of havla, it's kind of, grouped together. In a grouped together situation, even though at the end of the day, you're getting value based on the person taking for the Shabbos or the non-kosher, it's okay. But that's in a case where there's a proper partnership. What I'm saying it's a little more complicated is where you don't really have a partnership. I mean, it's not that the Gentile is an active partner. You're just bringing that Gentile in for the Shabbos, and that obviously has to be enough of a transaction. That's what I'm saying. You have to go to the rabbi. It's exactly how do you do that, because it's not a proper partnership. In honesty, I mean, it's not like the person works with you, has an office in your building, is part of the decision making. It's just a paper. It's just a makeshift kind of partnership. But that relationship allows for you to be open and function on throughout the Shabbos.
So is there rabbis?
At each city that specialize in business like
Yeah,
this?
I mean, like I said, there's methods of doing it, and just your rabbi will help you set that up.
My local.
I mean, if I went to my local rabbi, he's not specialized in every law in this.
I know. I can't give you the answer for that. That's not something I have experience in. But I know that if I needed to, I would study what I have to do. Your rabbi, first of all, may know it, and if he doesn't know it, he would guide you how to go about finding out how to do it. But again, see, it's not, because of things today have changed. Like we learned last week about sending things, buying Amazon Now or Amazon Prime, things that the Gentiles definitely has to deliver on the Shabbos, where it becomes, a FedEx that's 24 hours, it has to be delivered on the Shabbos. That's a problem. So once upon a time, it applied to people that had businesses. So, that business, when a person sets up a business, so you do all kind of things. And one of the things is you have to make sure your business is kosher, meaning to say it's permissible for Shabbos or for other questions that you have. Today, it's very easy for people to set up income on things that are not really a business, like an Airbnb. If you have a basement or a room, what have you, that you figured it's simple enough to do Airbnb. And today, it's not just like, it's not a proper business, but the fact is it is a business because it's a transaction. You're making money for the Shabbos. You need to speak to someone to find out how do you run your Airbnb on Shabbos. You could also just not be open on Shabbos, right? You could have, I don't take customers on Shabbos. That's simple. But if you want to be able to take the customers on Shabbos, you have to speak to the rabbis to figure out.
What about I'm just bringing this up because this happens a lot. Catering, because they cater our kiddush,
And they're making money.
money for the kiddush.
Well, so you have to remember there's two different things here. If you're paying first of all, to have someone, again, we talked about, so if someone's just cleaning up and serving, there's nothing being done on Shabbos that's prohibited. You're paying, you're not getting paid for the Shabbos. If you're getting paid beforehand, and if you're doing just bringing the food, so you're getting paid on Friday. It's like anyone who sells food for Shabbos. What's the difference if you go to the store that sells kugel that you're going to eat on Shabbos, or if the shul buys kugel that you're going to serve on Shabbos? You bought before Shabbos, it's fine. The question is, if you have a catering, you're getting paid for the event as opposed to being paid for the food. But again, your rabbi should be able to have that the contract is set up in such a way that's permissible on Shabbos. But these are all good questions. All right, let's just go into a little bit of the next laws, and we will just start with these and open to questions. These are three or four laws, but of a complicated subject, which is traveling on public transport on the Shabbos. So obviously there's planes, trains, and automobiles, but there's also boats, etc.
No,
Don't forget, we have in Brooklyn bicycles that have a spot for like elderly people taking, and
Okay.
the guy bikes you
Oh, okay.
with like a carriage.
Or you can have the horse and buggy in Manhattan. So here, like this. Ein mafligin besfina al hayam pachas mishloishes yom kedem Shabbos. One cannot get on a ship traveling any time that's within 3 days of Shabbos. The hainu miyoyim dal ve'elach, from Wednesday onward, asur is prohibited. Aval im hoylech dvar mitzvah, but if it's a mitzvah, not just a cruise or just business, it's permitted. I feel better Shabbos even on Friday to get on a boat. Now, a lot of boats leave on Friday. So if you're taking a cruise, etc.
What's the prohibition? I don't get it. Because you left before Shabbos.
So let's see right here. We look at footnote number 1. So as not to disturb the oneg, enjoyment of Shabbos, it takes 3 days to adjust and recover from sailing in the safety waters of the sea. Such voyages often upset one's system, and therefore, because it's not a prohibition of the violation of the Shabbos, it's the violation of the joy of Shabbos, the jet lag, so to say, of the experience of traveling on the Shabbos causes a disruption if you join Shabbos, and therefore you shouldn't do it
that showed no
within
alcohol in Hannah's system. One reason, the blood.
Therefore, you shouldn't do it 3 days within the Shabbos. Yes, Barbara.
Would this apply to flying as well, if you're going to do air travel?
That's an excellent question. Where you do air travel that finishes before Shabbos, but it disrupts your Shabbos. So here it seems like the law is where the boat is going to be traveling for more than 3 days. It's not that you're getting off the boat on Thursday, but you're getting on the boat and staying on the boat for, let's say, a few weeks. But until you get settled into the boat, into your new habitat, so to say, it'll take you 3 days, and therefore your Shabbos won't be joyful. And that's why the mitzvah is permitted. To do something that's going to exhaust you on Shabbos, and that could apply not with jet lag. How many people are exhausted on Shabbos? Everyone's exhausted on Shabbos. You work a whole week, Friday you run around, you feel exhausted on Shabbos. Maybe you should say, the law doesn't say anywhere that you should start dialing down your hectic week. You should try, of course, everything you have to do with the joy for Shabbos. But here you're changing your habitat that you're going to be on in Shabbos is different, so to say, than to do something that's going to exhaust you, even though you've landed and come to your new place before the Shabbos.
Okay,
But now you're on the
cruise. You're on 4 days before Shabbos, so you did everything correct. Now on Friday, you're going to go to a port to get off, to enjoy, and you can make sure you're back half a day. So you have half a day to prepare for Shabbat. You want to go out for a couple hours. Could you do that?
So that's different. I'm not saying this on authority, but just on a guess that, and I think this really applies to the way it is that once you're ready kind of on the boat, right? So just stopping off for a few hours at the port is not going to disrupt things. It's just getting used to sea life. The idea is that that's why we're going to see in a second that this applies to the sea, not to rivers, because the sea kind of people get seasick, right? So it takes 3 days to get adjusted to the sea life. So once you're ready on the boat, then you're just stopping in port for an hour. You've already kind of listen. People go on ferries. I've never traveled. I've gone the ferries. Like Barbara knows, if you live in Seattle, you take the ferries all the time. But I've never been on a cruise. But people that have been on a cruise, it's a real thing. Obviously, that they get really seasick and it's hard to get used to it. So one should not do it before the Shabbos.
My Sephardic family said, because it's just what they do. So I was told by them, and remember they're Sephardic, so Ashkenaz may have a different ruling, but on Friday you can't leave the boat.
Okay, because of the disruption, possibly. Maybe I'm wrong. I could accept it. Yeah, could be. Okay, so let's go. So he says like this. However, he adds that some authorities hold that is permitted even for a business trip, and not just a mitzvah or business trip, anything other than vacation. Other authorities hold that only for a mitzvah is permitted. Sirama and Mishnah Brura. Okay, so there's different opinions on if it's a business trip versus again, we have to examine this law a little more. These would be one of the laws. I've made some notes of the laws that we've learned in the Kitzur. The Kitzur is the short version of the law, and that when we learn the longer version of things like what we just learned about in lending out things and taking payment and hotels and other questions, how it applies today when cruises leave on a Friday. Okay, al naharos, but on rivers, which is not the sea, then it's not an issue. I feel about Shabbos even to leave on the Shabbos. As long as you're not obligated to do any work on the Shabbos. It says, and even if the animals pull the boat is permitted. So I guess, if you have a really narrow river and you have animals, I guess, attached to the boat on the side of the river and they walk the boat across, is not a problem. So he says, sailing on rivers usually does not disturb one's Oneg Shabbos. So then, and there's a lot of river trips today in Europe. You take river trips. So the river trip is different. A river vacation is different than a sea vacation than a
You can
a
go
cruise.
down the
Mississippi.
Or the
You could
Mississippi.
take a cruise on the Mississippi.
Yeah, that would apply. Yeah. And he says, and you need not travel out of the Tchum on Shabbos. Second, and you need not travel out of the Tchum on Shabbos. That means the water must be. Sorry, hold on, I can't see. Must be 10 handbreadths tfachim deep from the bottom of the boat to the floor of the river. So it has to be a deep enough river that you're not kind of moving out of the Tchum on Shabbos, you're not moving out of the space. Once it's over that space, it's not a problem. But if it's a low river, then it could be an issue. Again, very real. This is not, that's not common. 10 tfachim is like 10 tfachim from the bottom of the boat would be 10 tfachim is maybe 18 inches. So very rarely that we're not talking usually about those kind of cruises. Like I said, the Mississippi is obviously not 10, is a lot deeper than 10 inches.
It's a lot deeper.
Okay, let's stop here and open up to questions.
Make this comment. So it seems like, because someone told me this, like I just give you this example, and it's not about this law, but it kind of is. So like I said once, I want to get one of these fancy, sofas with electronic, lazy boys, electronic ones. So you can go back and they're like, you can't get that because then what are you going to do on Shabbos? I said, I don't use it. I just sit on it and I won't touch the electronic part. I'll even unplug it. And they said, no, you can't even sit on it. So you have to get the manual one. So it seems like these laws, some things you can't even do as a Jew because you might be tempted on Shabbos.
Okay, start again. I didn't get the question or the statement.
So I'm using this as an example. So like if you buy a lazy boy that's electric, because I said one day.
What's a lazy boy?
Oh, it's those recliner chairs.
Okay, sorry.
So and you can get an electric one where you push a button and it does it automatically. So my brother-in-law said, no, you can't get that because it's electric. And I said, so on Shabbos, because you can't use it on Shabbos. So I said, I'll unplug it on Shabbos if we can't use it. He says, you can't even sit on it on Shabbos. So what are you going to do? You might forget and sit on the chair. And so I'm saying with these laws and with a lot of laws, there's some things you can't do on a daily basis because it affects Shabbos.
Yeah, so that question's another question is the question of a person being used to doing something, and therefore you want to make sure that you don't. Okay, a lazy boy, if that's what it's called, and that's unplugged, and there's no way to use it mechanically on Shabbos, to have a prohibition of using it because you may turn it on Shabbos. It goes into the question of how much of that's a risk, because the same thing would apply to any electronics. Some people have the custom of putting like electric or magnetic or something on their light switches, because you're also used to how many people make the mistake, unfortunately, if you walk into the room and you just have the habit, as soon as you walk into the house to turn on your lights, you may turn on the lights on Shabbos. So there are people for that precaution, and a lot of synagogues have it. The synagogue in Seattle has it. Some people do it in their homes as well, that they'll put things to block that the person shouldn't turn on and off the light on the Shabbos, because that's what you're used to doing. But nowhere does it say that, although that's a precaution, that you can't live in a home that has light switches on Shabbos because you may turn it on, and or the same thing would apply to your oven or other things. So there's that could get ahead. You could get ahead of yourself on that. Of living in a place where you're not going to be tempted, or you're not going to be by mistake violating the Shabbos. So I don't know the source of your brother-in-law's ruling for that. I'm not sure if he's a rabbi, if he's just assuming it, or if he's his local rabbi.
He's just a guy who studies like I do.
Okay, so then if he has a source for that, I'd love to hear it. But otherwise, I haven't come across that prohibition. Anything else, Chevra?
Oh, what I wanted to add.
I could bring this up. Like, okay, so you own an iPad. You could put it somewhere where you won't touch it. But he's saying you want to use your chair and you can't touch electronics. It's Musar. So the chair is Musar on Shabbos. So where are you going to put your chair to hide it? So you should get a manual one so you can actually enjoy it.
But the thing is like this, you have to ask yourself if it's even a prohibition to sit on a chair that's unplugged that has an electronic use. iPad only has a use of the violation of the Shabbos. People put them away in the drawers. The TV is only used in a way of violating the Shabbos. The computers, there's no way of using the computer without violating the Shabbos. A easy chair, if you can sit in it without turning it on and it still has the use of a chair, it has two functions. It's a chair that also has electricity going through it. It's not like you can't compare a chair to an iPad because an iPad only has a use that's not permitted on Shabbos. The chair, you're allowed to sit on a chair on Shabbos. There's no prohibition sitting on a chair. The question is if that chair can also be used as in a way that violates Shabbos, and if it's only if a person will never sit in that chair if it's not on as an easy chair that's going to give you whatever the reclining or the massage, whatever it is one thing. But if a person would sit down and use it as a chair, anyways, it means it has a use as in a permissible way. It's different than if it only has a use in a prohibited way. Understand?
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Again, sorry for the beginning. Let me first. I see there's 3 chats. I'll check them quickly.
Can you see the text?
Yeah, I'm looking at them right now. Okay. Your question about the pikuach nefesh on the second question, the pikuach nefesh of the kier. So of course the kier has to be done on Shabbos. That's not a question. The question, it doesn't because you have to care for someone on Shabbos doesn't mean that prior to that emergency situation you shouldn't make it in such a way that is permissible on Shabbos. It means if you have a way to do something permissible, you're not allowed to do it in a way that violates the Shabbos just because when the Shabbos comes, it's going to be a situation of pikuach nefesh. It's very easy for you to set up a system where on Friday you've prearranged that the care for this elderly or sick person can be done in a way that doesn't violate the Shabbos. Pikuach nefesh is in a situation where you're facing the crisis right now. But if you're facing if you could prepare for the crisis in a way that permits you to and allows you to keep the Shabbos, that's something different.
I got the ruling.
Out of the Hatzalah book on how to do things. So it said, going to an emergency, you do everything like you would normally because you want to get there timely, you want to get there safe, and you want to go and save the guy's life. But when you're done, we don't want you leaving the bus, the ambulance at that place because A, you may be miles, and B, then you would never do the work because then you'd have to come back later and pick it up. So they say on the way home, though, if you use your right hand to turn on the bus, so on the way home, you use your left hand. Do it in a way you wouldn't have normally do it, but don't drive backwards. Try forwards.
Yeah, and also Lior asked a question about if you're in a dangerous situation on the road. Again, anytime you're in a dangerous situation, then you're not supposed to place yourself in danger. So you would continue driving until you're in a place of safety. As far as muksa toy goes, that has the Shino, yes, about taking out the batteries. Again, if it has a use that's not prohibited on Shabbos, where you can use it in a way that doesn't violate the Shabbos, is different than if the only way to use it is, like for instance, an iPad. Even if the battery is dead, it has no use, really, proper use at least, for unless you want to use it as a support. But even then, it's not a real use. I'm talking about a real use. That doesn't include the batteries or the electricity is different. Like I said, the chair, if the chair would not ever be used without the electricity being on, is different than if you could just sit down and have a conversation. And it would be nice also to have the massage while we're having that conversation, but it's not like a necessity. So if it has a usage, a chair has a usage to sit on. So to say that you can't have the chair in your house even because you can't hide it, even if you're not going to use it, I'm not even certain that you can't sit in the chair on its own without the electricity plugged in. All right, you ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining again. If Aaron, thank you for bringing to my attention about the Zoom, and next time don't wait so long. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.